Let's transition. Let's go to an AFC East battle between the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are favored by 3 points. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff in Buffalo. The over-under for this matchup is 53.5 points. So it's Tua Tagovailoa versus Josh Allen. So when I look at this matchup, let's start off with the Dolphins offense versus the Bills defense. You look at the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, they are led by Tua Tagovailoa, and Tua so far has been balling. 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1,024 passing yards. He's completing 71% of his passes. Tua Tagovailoa, through the first 3 weeks of the season, is the NFL MVP. He has been playing at a high level, and this entire Miami Dolphins offense has been playing at a high level. You look at some of their statistics. They're ranked first in the NFL. They average 552 total yards per game. They average 362 passing yards per game. That's ranked first in the NFL. They average 188 rushing yards per game. That's ranked first in the NFL. And they average 43 points per game. That's ranked first in the NFL. The one thing that has impressed me the most with this Miami Dolphins offense, because we know how great Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle are. We know how great they are. But what's impressed me the most is their ability to run the football. So far, in the first 3 weeks of the season, the Miami Dolphins are ranked first in the NFL in rushing yards per game. They average 188 rushing yards per game. So Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, they have done a tremendous job running the football. You got to give the Miami Dolphins credit. And their offensive line has done great. They got center Connor Williams up front, right guard Robert Hunt, right tackle Austin Jackson, left guard Isaiah Wynn. This Miami Dolphins offensive line, they're not getting the credit because they have such elite skill position players like Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, and Tua's playing at such a high level. We're forgetting about this Dolphins offensive line because this offensive line, they have opened up running lanes for Mostert and Devon Achane. Give them credit. Give this Dolphins offensive line a lot of credit. They're playing at a high level, and they're part of the reason why the Dolphins are 3-0 and why they are ranked first in a lot of major categories offensively. Give them credit for it, for sure. Mike McDaniel has done a tremendous job at calling plays for this Miami Dolphins offense. And look at this. Look at some of these numbers from their win over the Denver Broncos. 70-20 win over the Denver Broncos last week. A historic day in Miami. The Dolphins scored 70 points. That's tied for the second most points in NFL history. They had 726 total yards. That's the second most in an NFL game in NFL history. Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, Raheem Mostert, they all combined for 9 total touchdowns. That's how elite this Miami Dolphins offense is playing right now. And Tua, again, is the current NFL MVP. But he wouldn't be the MVP if he didn't have an elite receiver like Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, 25 receptions, 412 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill right now, he's the best receiver in pro football. It is not a conversation at the moment on who's the best receiver in the NFL because it's Tyreek Hill. I love Devontae Adams. I love Justin Jefferson. I love Jamar Chase. But right now, the best receiver in the NFL is Tyreek Hill. Now, Jalen Waddle didn't play in their Week 3 win over the Broncos, but Jalen Waddle's going to play in this matchup against the Buffalo Bills. And so they're playing well offensively. Now, the biggest challenge is going to be for this Bills defense. The Bills defense, they have to try and contain the Dolphins offense. That they're not going to completely stop the Dolphins offense, but you got to try and contain the Dolphins offense. That's their best. That's their best chance to be able to try and win this game. Now you look at the Buffalo Bills defensively, right? Obviously, their defensive coordinator is Leslie Frazier. So it's going to be Leslie Frazier going up against Mike McDaniel. And that's what I'm most excited about, because Leslie Frazier knows his defense, and the Buffalo Bills over the last few weeks, they've done a pretty good job. Last week in week 3, the Bills, they held the Commanders. And remember, this is a Commanders team that had just put up 35 against the Denver Broncos in week 2. They held the Commanders to only 3 points last week in week 3. Only 3 points. So you got to give the Bills defense credit. You got to give them some credit. And again, they got a tall task this week in this matchup against Miami. A very, very tall task. And so I'm looking at this Bills defense right now. Up front, you got players like Greg Rashu, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones. They still don't got Von Miller. I expect Von Miller to be back at some point. But they did lose Tremaine Edmonds. He was the former linebacker on the Buffalo Bills. He went to Chicago. But now at linebacker, you got Terrell Bernard. You got also Matt Milano and Tre'Davious White in that secondary, and Micah Hyde. This is a tall task for this Bills secondary. Micah Hyde, Tre'Davious White, Taron Johnson, they're going to be challenged in this matchup because, again, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are unguardable. They're unguardable. The best thing you can try and do is apply pressure on Tua. That way the Dolphins offense is thrown off and they're not in a rhythm. Last week, the Broncos defensively, they did absolutely nothing against the Dolphins. Nothing. They did nothing to throw off Tua's rhythm. And that's why you saw Tua have over 300 yards passing, and they had 9 total touchdowns between Akane, Tyreek Hill, and Mozart. They did nothing to throw off that Dolphins offense. So the Bills, I feel like their pass rush is going to have to try and apply some pressure on Tua Tagovailoa. So Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Leonard Floyd, Greg Rasul, they're going to have to apply some pressure, and they need to win their matchup against that Dolphins offensive line for them to have a chance. The Bills defensive line needs to win their matchup against the Dolphins offensive line. That's the only chance that the Bills have. Now, when you look at the Buffalo Bills, obviously their quarterback is Josh Allen. And so far this season, Josh Allen, statistically, he hasn't been great. 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 728 passing yards. He's completing 73% of his passes. Josh Allen has not been great statistically this year. But the one thing I want to give the Bills credit for is they found a nice, reliable running back in James Cook who they can rely on to run the football. This year, the Miami Dolphins, they average 149 rushing yards per game. That's ranked 7th in the NFL. And we've seen in years prior where the Bills, they didn't have a reliable running game to depend on. And honestly, it was times where Josh Allen had to run the football and help them in their running game. But now James Cook, he has performed well so far this season. James Cook, 44 carries, 267 rushing yards, averaging over 6 yards per carry. James Cook, he's the brother of Jets running back Dalvin Cook. James Cook has played well in these first 3 weeks for the Buffalo Bills. And the Buffalo Bills are not one-dimensional anymore. They can run the football. And so that's what has impressed me so far in these first 3 weeks. We'll see if they can keep it up. But that has helped this Bills offense be more balanced. It's more balanced now. Now, their best receiver is Stephon Diggs. For the season, Stephon Diggs, 25 receptions, 279 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. Stephon Diggs is the best player offensively for the Buffalo Bills, not named Josh Allen. He is their go-to receiver, and, it was rumors in the offseason. And, there was even earlier in the season when Stephen A. went on First Take, and he said Stephon Diggs wants out of Buffalo. And, of course, Stephon Diggs denied those accusations, those rumors, but I feel like there's some truth to it. I know Stephen A. is not going to go on First Take and just make up stuff. Somebody told Stephen A. that information. But people had questions about Stephon Diggs once we came into the season because people were wondering how committed is Stephon Diggs to the Buffalo Bills Super Bowl aspirations. Like, how committed is Stephon Diggs? Because they're saying that Stephon Diggs feels like the Buffalo Bills window has passed. So far, he's played pretty well. 25 receptions, over 250 receiving yards for the season. He's played well to start the season. But I'm interested to see on that Bills offense, who else can step up in the passing game for Josh Allen? Will it be Gabe Davis this week? Will it be Trent Sherfield? I like their tight end and Dawson Knox. So who else is going to step up in that Bills offense? And that's something that we gotta keep in mind and look out for, because I like Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, but they're not on the level of a Tyreek Hill and a Jalen Waddle. They're not even on the level of a Brandon Ayuk and a Deebo Samuel or Jamar Chase and a T. Higgins. They're not. But they're solid. They really, really are. You look at what the Bills were able to do last week against the Commanders. Last week against the Commanders, the Bills had 218 passing yards, 168 rushing yards. Cook had 15 carries, 98 rushing yards, averaging over 6 yards per carry. So that was impressive for that Bills offense. But last week, I'm looking at the Bills and their receivers. Stephon Diggs, 8 receptions, 111 receiving yards. Gabe Davis only had 1 catch for 35 receiving yards. That was a touchdown reception, but that was it. Sherfield, 2 receptions, 18 receiving yards. Hardy, 2 receptions, 15 receiving yards. Who's going to be that other receiver who steps up in this Bills offense to complement what Stephon Diggs is doing on the other side? Usually it's Gabe Davis, but we'll see who is going to be in week 4 against the Dolphins. That's something else we got to keep an eye on as well. Now, when you look at these two teams have the highest points per game averages so far this season. The Buffalo Bills are averaging 30.3 points per game. The Dolphins are averaging 43.3 points per game. So these are the two best offenses right now in the NFL from a points per game standpoint. So this is going to be interesting. Josh Allen, he has over the last year or so, Josh Allen has turned the ball over a lot. And it's crazy because I think Josh Allen is more talented than Tua Tagovailoa is, but Tua protects the football better than Josh Allen. He really, really does. Tua doesn't turn the ball over the way that Josh Allen does. But also, Josh Allen, has more responsibility than Tua, because there are times where the Buffalo Bills in the past, they have been relying on Josh Allen to carry them. Now, the Dolphins running game hasn't been elite either, but I feel like they've been more reliable than the Bills running game over the last few years. So I like the head coaches as well in this matchup. Mike McDaniel versus Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott is a defensive mind, and so he thinks defense first as a head coach. And Mike McDaniel is the exact opposite. He's offense first. So it's going to be interesting, that chess match with the Dolphins offense versus the Bills defense, because that's essentially Mike McDaniel versus Sean McDermott. But it's going to be a great matchup coming into the season. I had the Miami Dolphins winning the AFC East. And so I feel like the Miami Dolphins are the better football team. And I feel like right now, Tua is playing better than Josh Allen is. I roll with the Miami Dolphins to beat the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. I'll go Dolphins 34, Bills 28.